So there was so much going on at the Congress and the conference. I took a lot of notes, and it's very difficult to absorb all the information. I still am absorbing it. And so after I'm done, we can do Q&A, or maybe we do Q&A for both of us. I don't know. We'll see how that works. But basically, we had two events. So WILPF International every 3 years holds a congress. So we went to that, and then 2 days later, we had another 3-day conference, which was celebrating the 100th anniversary of WILPF, and that was open to everybody. So there are two different things I'm going to talk about. First, I just want to tell you why I actually went to The Hague. I was really reluctant to go. I don't know why. I kind of discovered it in my whole body. And also, confession, I don't enjoy attending meetings. So, and I know a lot of people in this room feel the same way. Meetings can be very productive, and after I go to a meeting and come out, I feel great. It's like, wow, we get a lot done. But I thought, 6 days of meetings, really? But last fall, Terry said, you know, you gotta go. She encouraged me, and then at our last board meeting, Barb Beasley said, we send Laura to the 100th anniversary conference. So that's done. So I said, okay, I guess I gotta go. So I really appreciate the support of the branch members for sending me there, and I thank you all in this room who are members of the Detroit branch. I'm very student. So, and I also had to thank, in honor of Helga Hertz. Helga Hertz, as many of you know, was a longtime member of WILPF, died several years ago, lived a very simple life, and as a result, she was able to leave a lot of money to Detroit, US, International, Germany, and another section of WILPF, I believe. So it's with her money that I was really able to fly over to the Netherlands. But, you know, I wanted to go because I'd never been to an international meeting before, and I was curious to meet people from around the world and to see a part of history, to just be a part of this historical event. And, you know, these meetings tend to strengthen organizations. You come out with better resolutions, you come out with better direction of where you want to go. But ultimately, the reason I went was I want to try in my own small way to make a contribution to social peace movements. For who? For my two daughters and for everybody else. And I think a lot of people in this room who are activists, they're doing it for their kids, their grandkids, their siblings, cousins. And that's why we're really all here, for the future. So I was ultimately very glad that I went to the conference, and both meetings were very inspiring and exciting. The first meeting was more pro forma, because it was not the open to all event. But we did some really neat things. I met a lot of great people. For example, in the space of just a few days, I met grassroots activists from all over the world, and many of them working under real terrible conditions. So at one plenary, I just happened to sit down, and I see this woman next to me. And she's from Afghanistan, and it's like, where else can I meet an Afghanistan woman working on a grassroots organization that provides services for women? In 5 minutes, I got an earful from her about how corporations in the United States are messing with the civil society organizations in Afghanistan. So she's working with a group that provides services to women, and there's an organization, private corporation, consulting / engineering group called Tetra Tech. And the United States, your taxpayer dollars, you pay to send Tetra Tech to monitor her group. And what she told me is what they do is they just show up once in a while. They don't provide any support services. They're basically skimming off the tax dollars, and then they don't give them the support, the personnel, and the buildings, and whatever that they need. So she did not have much good to say about them. So that was one person I met, and then another time, a kind of serendipitous event was, as many of you know, the International Criminal Court is in The Hague. So I'm getting off this tram, this other lady's getting off the tram, and we're both walking the same direction. Well, I assume she's going where I'm going, right? I'd say, are you going to the WILPF, conference? Oh, no, no, I'm not. I'm going to the ICC, the criminal court. And she said she's a lawyer for the former Yugoslavia tribunal. And I said, thank you for doing what you're doing. And furthermore, can you possibly prosecute President Bush for starting those wars? Well, she had to be political. She tactfully said it would be very difficult. But anyway, I think there's an inkling, a glint in her eye. I think she got me. I think she understood it. And then I had to travel all the way to the Netherlands to finally meet a woman, a member in Michigan who lives in Mount Pleasant. We'd been talking on the phone for a year, and we could never connect. She could not come to Detroit, and so finally we get to Europe and meet her. So those are the kind of things that happen. And you know, meeting those people, a lot of people from all over the world, was a big thrill for me. The first thing I want to start off with is a little bit about the history of WILPF. And as you all know, it's been 100 years, and we were born in April 2015. And I think it's a pretty impressive thing for our organization to last that long. So in this picture, I don't know exactly the numbers in there, but we've been told over 1,300 women from over a dozen countries traveled to The Hague in the Netherlands during World War I. And they wanted to discuss ways to end the war, to bring the warring parties together to negotiate. And getting to the Netherlands wasn't easy. The British government actually refused visas to 80 of their members, 84 of their members, and only 40 were able to attend. The ship that was traveled by Jane Addams, founder of Hull House, social worker, and eventual founder of WILPF, her ship was with several, dozens of Americans, was stuck off Britain because they wouldn't let the ship pass for several days. So here we are in 2015, and travel is much easier. So we're very fortunate we live in our times. But there's even one country in Africa that did not give visas for the WILPF women there to travel. So there are still some barriers. And then when the women who came from developing nations, it's one thing for us to pay a certain amount of money for a hotel room. It's totally another thing for them. And sections from all over the world contributed to help get them there, but I know it was still a hardship. So just to see them there was a great thing. So I'm going to talk briefly, shortly about the Congress first, and the one that occurs every 3 years. And it was held at the Academy Hall of the Peace Palace. So on your right's the Peace Palace. That's where the original conference was held in 1915. To the left was the other one, was the Academy Hall. That's where we were. So, and the Peace Palace was built in 1913 as a result of a peace treaty, a conference held in The Hague in 1899. And they decided that they wanted to have an international court of arbitration, and the Peace Palace would be built for this purpose. So we had over 300 women. Oh yeah, those are quilts from inside the academy. And I have a quiz here at the bottom. Anyone know what song that is? No, you can't know. Suzanne knows. Yeah, she's a musician too.
It's Beethoven's.
Yeah, Beethoven's Ode to Joy. So I had to take a picture of that because my sister's a piano player, and I got to show her that. So I thought the musicians might appreciate it. So we had over 300 women who attended, and 40 sections were represented. And we're not quite sure, but we think this is the first Congress where all the sections were represented. It hasn't been confirmed yet. 2 new sections were formally approved, one from Ghana and the other from Cameroon. And both women, gave speeches from the representatives, and then we formally voted to allow them in this section. And so this is a big thing for WILPF to have more countries from Africa represented. And then we also had a returning section, Israel. Israel had been a section, dropped out, and then they came back. And if those of you might know Aliyah Strauss, she's the president of Israel WILPF. We actually had her in Detroit several years ago. I'm really kind of proud of the fact that some of these big shots that you'll see were in Detroit several years ago, that we hosted them. So I just thought that was neat. I was going to show a picture of me with Aliyah, but that was too self-serving. I don't know. So
T-shirts are available.
Yeah, T-shirts are available with me and Aliyah. Thank you, Ray. So now we also approved 2 new I think they call them working groups. I'm not sure. Working groups of WILPF. They're not larger than 3 sections, but they are Nicaragua and Uganda. So one of the important things that we actually accomplished is we passed a new manifesto, statement of all our beliefs. And there was an original manifesto passed in 1915, a lot shorter than the current one. So we have them reprinted here, and if anyone's interested in taking one and reading it, it gives you a great idea of what we're all about. And the donations are accepted, printed by Union Press, I'm proud to say. So that was besides the resolutions, that was probably the most significant thing that came out of the Congress. And we were very excited to have that happen. And for those people who are members, you know, it's also important to read it and study it because there's a lot of information there. It would be great for study groups, I think, to have political discussion from. We also voted for a new executive committee, and these are women from different countries. One of them is Samina Nazir, the one in the middle, third from left. She also was in Detroit. Very valuable, wonderful speaker. People were really impressed by her talk in Detroit. And then go to the next slide is a picture of our president, who is from Japan, WILPF. So we are really hoping that the executive board better represents the diversity in WILPF. That was our goal, one of them. So anyway, in this Congress we had several meetings among different groups and sections, and Keely, you can go to the next one. And so these are just shots from the different meetings. Some are the outside ones, the Americans. We had our separate meetings. And of course, I want to point out that, you know, it was not all peaceful. We had controversy. And the only reason I'm saying that is because, you know, you can't get 300 women in a room and have everyone agree on everything, because if they did, we'd have to really worry about the state of democracy in our organization. So, you know, there was some controversy about, you know, initially we didn't have enough diversity in the executive committee, now we do, we feel we do. The notion of patriarchy was quite controversial. So some people feel we should still talk about the issue of patriarchy. Some people feel, you know, that's kind of outmoded feminist notion. And, you know, there's a lot of schools of thought on that, and I am not well versed enough in that issue to talk about it. My daughter, who's a feminist, and not that one, my other one, she would definitely give you a lecture on all of this. But she's not here. Thank you. So, and then, you know, but the meetings were, what I found though was that there was quite a bit of unity, and that everybody was just so urgent about how we have to do things and, you know, move on and get beyond our differences. So that was really important. And then we also had time for fun. So, next slide. So outside we had a flash mob where we showed someone organized, the Dutch section organized this, of course. They had posters of past, you know, women heroes, and we each held a picture of these different women. And then they had a great band. I think it was a klezmer band. It was fantastic. And then people were dancing. There's the Leah Strauss, you know, 80-something years old, getting into it. And it was really a lot of fun. Another thing that we did, a side trip, was we went to hear a gospel concert by this woman who sang. She had an operatic voice, and it was held at the Gandhi Center at The Hague. So, you know, I'm listening to this gospel music, I'm thinking, this is really multicultural, you know, it's like, she was not of African descent, you know, and it's just beautiful how the Dutch section hosted us, welcomed us, and provided these events for us. So here we are in the next slide at the Peace Palace 100 years later. And we were not allowed to go in as a group. They only reserved it for different kinds of meetings. But we decided to get a picture to mimic the original picture taken in 1915. So you could do a Where's Waldo and look for someone.
Who owns the Peace Palace, and why did they come to the
Well, you know, the people, I think that the government of The Hague owns it. Now, the ICC really is not in there. That's sort of like a symbolic location, but the ICC is held in buildings adjacent to World Forum, which you'll see. Why we couldn't have meetings there, I think the building is old and they don't want a lot of wear and tear. Now we did get to go in there during they had a ceremony, which I didn't put up here, but in the Netherlands, the president, chief main feminist there was named Alida Jacobs, and they had a bust made of her and they dedicated and they installed it in the Peace Palace. So some people got to go in there during the unveiling of this bust. And then later on they had a reception and the rest of us could go in there. So we were confined to this one area in the front. So I don't know the correct reason, but I heard someone say it could be because it's getting to be an old building and the wear and tear. And you know how WILPF members are, you know, we just, we'll just tear up the joints. Yeah. Okay, so next I'll talk about the 100th Anniversary Congress, which is titled Women's Power to Stop War. This was held at the World Forum, and it was about a mile, 3/4 of a mile away from, so that's the World Forum building, and this is just a street right next to it, which is lined with flags. And then there are buildings next to it where the International Criminal Court is actually housed. So at this meeting, we had over 900 women attend, and they were from 80 countries, and including from several war zones like Yemen, Pakistan, Somalia, and some other, Cameroon. And this conference is open to all. So it wasn't just WILPF running it, the workshops, but we also had many NGOs, non-governmental organizations, other organizations, also running the workshops. So we had a wide gamut of organizations there. And I know that a lot of women joined WILPF as a result of this. So that's inside the World Forum. And any of the pictures that are good have been credited. The crummy ones are mine. Because my camera was not, the photographer was not working. Let's put it that way. But anyway, I think that it was quite a tribute to WILPF that we could draw 900 women from all over the world. And it speaks a lot to WILPF's reputation. So that they thought this is a conference worth attending. And I heard a lot of good news about it afterwards. People were really pleased that they came. And we had people from such far-flung places too. I mean, Polynesia, Australia, of course, many people from the African countries, South America, Colombia, so it was exciting. So this is the grand opening. And we're fortunate to have Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Broadcast 2 hours of it live. And you can go on Democracy Now! Or YouTube and find this video. And so she interviewed 4 people. Edith Valentine is a former Secretary General and President, and I'm going to mention her later. And then Jody Williams.
And also, Laura, our representatives to the United Nations.
Right. She was a representative to the United Nations for WILPF, And then Jody Williams, she started, was one of the people who started the Ban Landmines campaign.
Nobel Peace Prize.
I will mention that. And then the third person is Laima Gabowe. Laima Gabowe, who is a Nobel Peace Prize winner from Liberia. And the last one is our current Secretary General, Madeleine Reeves. So we're fortunate to actually have four Nobel laureates at this meeting. And here, in addition to Laima, who you saw earlier, we had a woman from Iran and from Northern Ireland, and they gave some terrific speeches. So I just put a couple of quotes up there. So it's just a very inspiring, So anyway, that opening night was just really inspiring. And to give you a taste of that, Kilia's going to play 2 minutes of a speech that Laima made. She won the Nobel Peace Prize along with Sirleaf Jonathan, another woman, because they basically confronted the dictator in Liberia.
That are supposed to bring our world back upright are dismantled, but particularly looking at the UN Security Council, 5 permanent members. Does it make sense in this day and age? It's high time that we all begin to raise our voices and say those things that will make very powerful people uncomfortable. Because whether we like it or not, we are always not invited in those spaces. It's time for us to stand up, women. It's time for us to stand up, sisters. It's time for us to do some of the most unthinkable things. 100 years ago, the journey to the Hague was not an easy journey. Some of us took airplanes. People came on ships. The women from the UK were denied, and because of the threat of them coming to the Hague, ferry transportation was suspended. They had to go through a lot to get here, to set the pace for what we do in our lives today. In our case, can we just do something? The children of Iraq, Afghanistan, Nigeria, those 300 girls, the ones of Mexico and other places, are asking us again, can the women just do something? Jane Addams, in her reflection on her time at The Hague, said, and I quote, "Never have I been so thankful for any decision as I look at it now. The undertaking repaid all that it cost us 100-fold." Can we look back at our lives and our times of activism and say we've been repaid because we did nothing but our absolute best? Whether you come from the US, whether you come from The Hague, whether you come from DR Congo, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, we may all have come in different ships, but we're all on the same boat now. We have the power to stop war and turn our upside-down world upright. Thank you.
She implored us to do something, and she kept saying, will you do something for the women and girls of the world? And so we had several great speakers. And also for people who like to download things on their iPods and just work by the listen to things, these things are on voicerepublic.com. So you can do that and listen to a lot of these events, especially the grand opening. So we had 47 breakout sessions. It was really intense. And these are some of only a few topics of these sessions. Of course, I can only go to about 6, and I took a lot of notes, but I wish I could have gone to all 47. The last one, Speed Dating Professionals, not what you think it might be. It was basically activists, they call them professional activists, but getting together, literally doing that, 3-minute thing, speed dating things, so that they could get to know each other really quickly. And then afterwards, if they really want to connect with someone else's issue, they talk to them after. I thought, that's a great idea. We got to do something in DAPJ should do that. Yeah. Get on that, Wendy. I don't know why I looked at Wendy. So, oh yeah, go to the next screen. So naturally, when people talk too much, you got to have a timekeeper. You can't see your sign that says time with an exclamation point. And she was serious. So, a lot of the themes we talked about were the root causes of war. I'm not going to go into a lot of the politics, except to mention that the themes that kept recurring throughout these days were the issues of patriarchy, capitalism, where people said, the system we got is not working, or racism and inequality. And I feel like those threads ran through much of these meetings. Now, incidentally, my experience of this congress and conference is going to be totally different from Mary's. And she may say, that's not the one I went to. So, but that's just what I picked up on in the meetings that I attended. And you'll get examples of that when I talk about a couple other people. So I was really impressed by the high level of thinking in the sessions and plenaries, by the people's their commitment to change and their passion. And I was especially struck by the women from developing nations because they face totally different issues from us. And more than we Americans, perhaps, they are facing the most egregious effects of the actions of multinational corporations, of neoliberalism, and of the Western governments. So their grassroots organizing, some of it has life and death consequences. And I want to just highlight 2 people that spoke, just talk about what they talked about. So this one Iraqi activist, I'm not giving her name, she spoke passionately about the US invasion of Iraq. And if you can imagine the frustration, from living through that war and then coming to report it, I can't imagine speaking about that to a room of hundreds of people, and we don't react to me in an audience. We don't gasp, but we really should have, And so she was very passionate. What she talked about was how the invasion unleashed these ultra-conservative forces, which have culminated ISIS, as we know, and a backlash against women. So even way before ISIS, Iraq was passing all these laws against women to violate their rights and basically turn them into second-class citizens. Now, she did acknowledge Saddam Hussein's brutal regime, but she also noted that women were better off under his regime than they are now. For example, she cited the high level of education that women could achieve at that time, and now they cannot go to college. And so when she noted the rise of ISIS, the Islamic State, and she said, and I quote, "ISIS was cooked under American torture." And quote, "Those who bombed Iraq created ISIS." So clearly she laid the rise of ISIS at the feet of the American government. And she noted that the invasion also unleashed some neoliberal capitalism in Iraq. Instead of bringing democracy to Iraq, it brought privatization, mass layoffs in the public sector. Now, we in Detroit, that sounds really familiar, doesn't it? So what they're doing in Detroit and the United States as a whole, privatizing, they're doing it in Iraq also. They're taking the show on the road, so to speak. So she had such disdain for so-called democracy. So if we're not bringing good democracy in these countries, they're not going to be interested. And she said, this quote I just love, she said, "Capitalism is at large in Iraq." And she said, nationalized interests were just, industries were just sold off wholesale to private interests. And she asked, were we just attacked for oil? That was one person who spoke. Another one I heard in a workshop. This other woman, her name is Sandra Zinico-Batz. She's a Mayan in Guatemala. And she spoke about the transnational corporations, their policies of extracting everything they can from the earth. And this particularly hits the indigenous communities hard. The four types of companies that she mentioned were mining, hydropower, agriculture, which she called monocropping, and the service industry. But she focused on mining because her area of expertise was fighting the Canadian mining companies in Guatemala who are just removed, they're taking the land from the indigenous people and, of course, totally despoiling it. And she noted that the expansion of these transnational companies is backed by the World Bank, and that it occurred after CAFTA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement. So we have to be aware of the TPP as well. So the Mayan people are at the front of the struggle. They're calling for a ban on mining, and it's women who are taking the lead in this. They're talking about the human rights violations. The journalists are speaking up, and as a result, they are being jailed. So one woman, for example, Barbara Diaz-Sunin, was harassed in jail, and so they're fighting for her release now. So, you know, she pointed out the relationship between extraction and war. And in order to extract, they have to wage war on the indigenous people, because the indigenous people are not just going to go away and say, yes, you can have our land. So this one was confronting the mining companies directly. And I think that's where I could see the difference between them and us in terms of their struggle. Their struggle seems to be more intense. So, and I found it to be very progressive politically. And I think it's just because of their direct experience. You know, while many of us accommodate ourselves to the economic system we call capitalism, they confront it head on. And they understand the system. They get it. So they just have a totally different mindset. Anyway, and I'm closing my talk now, and I just want to point out another highlight was hearing Edith Valentine. She's a former Secretary General, President of WILPF and United Nations representative. And she described herself as 93 and a half years old, sharp as a tack. And I encourage you to get on the grand opening where she's interviewed by Amy Goodman. She talks about how she became a WILPF member. It's very interesting. She was an immigrant in Canada, and so she met WILPF there. So her experience is very interesting. But in her talks, she's really fiery. And she said she recalled the anti-nuke movement in the 80s, where people were in the streets a lot more than we are now. And she said, we have got to take back the streets. And she was just said, you know, we have to go back to that kind of activism. So she was very inspiring. I'm just throwing her name up there to encourage you to go look her up. So overall, I really enjoyed meeting women from all over the world, hearing their struggles. They were really eager to share their stories, and I was really eager to listen because we have a lot to learn from them. And I'm sure they feel maybe they want to learn from us too. So, you know, among the few things, I learned a lot of little things here and there. For example, these are just off-the-wall things. Samina Nazir from Pakistan, she mentioned that in Pakistan, there's no space for women in their civil society anymore. They're putting women, they're not allowing them to even join boards and organizations. And she gave a really simple example of how this directly affects life, real life. She said, there aren't as many hospital beds for women in Pakistan as there are for women. So that's a little bizarre from our perspective. Here, every woman in here goes to the hospital, you can get into a hospital bed. It won't be Rich and not Carol. I'm not getting rich. and she said, this is because there are not enough women on the hospital boards and the rest of the civil society organizations. So just little things like that give you an idea of how important it is to have women involved in civil society at all levels. I learned that it costs, our military spending all over the world is $1.77 trillion. This is 2.3% of our gross domestic product, and that per person, we spend $245 per year. So that's just a nice little nugget we heard from an expert on military spending.
But it's 51 or 52% of our taxes.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, Suzanne points out in the United States, the percentage of our taxes, half of it goes to the military. And the last thing I learned is, on a fun note, is that Amsterdam has the best transportation I've seen. I hope before I die, I see real public transportation. I know my daughter's time, they're going to see real better public transportation because the young people are going to demand it. But it doesn't work if you're not a good rider. And so the first day I spent in Amsterdam, had a great time. I went to the Dutch Resistance Museum, walked around, got on a train to The Hague, almost ended up in Germany. So if you go to Amsterdam, let me tell you what train to take, because I learned the hard way. So, and then on the last night of our conference, we had a celebration, and it was a blast. We had a rock band, because we are young and old, we all like to dance, and we had a belly dancer, a professor, PhD. Okay, I don't belly dance. We were filmed. I'm just glad it wasn't filmed, but I did belly dance. And what she showed us was an ancient dance she claimed goes back 4,000 years. They call it Dance of the Goddess. It was in the time when it was a matriarchal society in the Middle East. And she showed us this dance, and we all followed along, and we just had a blast. So if you think you can't get several hundred women to belly dance at the same time, I'll tell you about that. So in the end, I left the conference with a feeling of hope. You can go to the last one. Yeah, just a feeling of hope, despite all the terrible problems in our world and seeming acceleration of those problems. But the reason for my optimism lies in the people that I met. Truly, my sisters from America, United States, from all over the country, and in the resilience of the women from the other countries like Guatemala and Cameroon, and those women were very inspiring to me. So, and I also feel like WIL's future lies in its diversity, and our strength comes from the diversity of our organization, and I hope we can improve on that. I feel, and this was reiterated several times at the conference, that our differences actually give us strength. So the overall mood was just hopeful and joyous and embracing, and there was a feeling of unity, and the sign there, which you probably can't says, "We are the movement." So I hope that we can all take that unity and move forward, and I encourage everyone here to get involved with WILPF. That's my